Oh man, so this entire time heading into the regular season for the Montreal Canadiens, there was always a question going on as to what was going to happen with Carey Price. Canadiens franchise goaltender, pretty expensive goaltender at that, and the only NHL player to be making an 8-figure salary per season and find himself in the Stanley Cup Finals. He's been a legend, this Carey Price has been. And this entire time heading into the season, there was always this idea asking, hey, is he going to play? Is he going to stick around? Is he going to go on the LTIR? Whatever. And for the most part, it didn't really hit. And what I mean by that is it was only really just a hypothetical conversation. It was a thought. It wasn't real. It was fugazi. It's a wazy. It's a woozy. It's fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not freaking real. And so now, when Arpon Basu goes out there and gives us this update on Twitter, it's real now. And this is when it starts to hit. Arpon Basu said on Twitter yesterday, I'm told that Carey Price will be placed on off-season LTIR today, which will get the Canadiens under the off-season and barely under the regular season salary cap. Kirby Dach's contract put the Canadiens over the off-season cap, which is 10% above the regular season cap. Much of the Canadiens' cap situation is dependent on how things play out in camp, but the Dach contract got the Canadiens to roughly $10.2 million over the cap. Putting Price's 10.5 on the LTIR is nearly a full recapture, but they will be tight against it, barring any other moves. Kent Hughes confirmed Carey Price is going on the off-season LTIR as of yesterday. Here is Daniel LeBlanc going out there saying, hey, Arpon, can you explain the difference between, never mind, forget about it. And Arpon Basu replies, in very basic terms, the off-season LTIR is when the contract essentially disappears. In-season LTIR, you're allowed to spend over the cap. And so now everything that we had seen with Carey Price is all of a sudden real. It's no longer a hypothetical conversation. It's no longer an if scenario. Oh, if the Canadiens place Price on the LTIR. I guess you could go out there and say that this was inevitable because the way the Canadiens had structured up their team, especially with the Kirby Dach contract from yesterday, it was sort of an inevitability that the $10.3 million that they were over the cap by was going to be vindicated when they put Carey Price and his 10.5 on the LTIR, and it's probably going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Here's another update from Kent Hughes verbally saying that he doesn't have any update on Carey Price's knee, but also reiterates that without any sort of intervention, aka surgery, they don't believe that Carey Price will be able to play this season. So now that it's happened, it's actually real, and it's so difficult to go out there and try to process that Carey Price is done. Most likely done, right? You don't miss out on a full NHL season bearing, 5 games, miss out on an entire offseason's worth of training the next season, and then start the next year on the offseason LTIR. You don't do that and then just come back and be a good NHL goaltender again. That's just not realistic. It's not something that I think is going to happen here. However, I will admit, if it does happen, if Carey Price comes back in 2023, 2024, he plays 50 games and he posts up like a 915, then boy oh boy, he's an absolute god amongst men. So I don't really know if that's going to possibly happen here, but just from everything that we have been foreseeing with Carey Price, his health, and of course his age, he's 35 years old. I know he's signed on till the end of 2026, where he's going to be, 38? But at the end of the day, the guy had himself what was one just fantastic playoff run left in his body, where he had a .924 save percentage in 22 games, going to the finals, and that might have been the last hoorah for Carey Price in his career. I mean, I guess there was the one win left that he had in the 2021-2022 season, but that really doesn't appear to be too much of a high note now, doesn't it? There was that speculation that we saw, and we explored this in the last Carey Price-related video, going over how Carey Price in his final win of the season this previous year, he stood out. He did not tend to crease for the last 10 seconds because he waved to his family, and that was a really sentimental moment. People were speculating as to whether or not he's waving to the crowd because, hey, he finally has a win. He had his last win in the NHL in the Stanley Cup Finals against Tampa Bay in game 4? And so after a year's worth of rehab and losing, he comes back and he wins his first game. He's waving to the crowd, but no, maybe he's waving to his family because, hey, guess what? Daddy's back. He's playing a game and he has won, or maybe his waving is a waving of goodbye, because at the end of the day, if he's saying bye to a National Hockey League career, let the guy go out there and wave to his family. Let him go out there and not tend the crease for the last 10 seconds of the game. Who cares? Like, this is a career's worth of NHL greatness being wrapped up here in one individual moment, and the guy had himself some very good prime years. It's just, now it's a lot easier to say that the waving was a signal of goodbye rather than, hey, I'm back. So let's go back over to the Arpon Basu Twitter thread and read what he has to converse about with Marco D'Amico. They talked a little bit more about the contract. It's the same process for both. The Canadiens can now spend $10.5 million more than the offseason salary cap. Yes, Arpon says, but they have to be under the regular season cap by opening night, so that's not very beneficial. Had they been able to file a cap complaint roster with Price and then put him on the LTIR after the season starts, they would create space, Price's hit minus pre-existing space, and yada yada yada. I don't really care about reading this entire conversation about the nitpicky, semantical details of the LTIR, but Arpon Basu pretty much goes out there and talks about the other goaltenders in the situation. Abdul goes out there and says this, I wonder what they do with Cayden Primeau then. He's still unsigned. Basu goes out there and says that his contract is likely to not count against the Canadiens' cap space since he'll be in Laval, and the cap hit will probably be under the threshold they're allowed to bury. Marco D'Amico then chips in and says that that number is $1.1 million in AAV, so if he earns less than that, it will not count against the Canadiens' cap when he is sent down to the Rocket. Also, we had ourselves another conversation to have about other players on the LTIR too, not just Carey Price. This is a Montreal Gazette article from yesterday going over the same thing about the Kirby Dach contract, Carey Price on the LTIR, etc., etc. This is what it says towards the end of the piece. Price might not be the only player on the LTIR to start off the year. Kent Hughes described forward Paul Byron, who is coming back from hip surgery, as being in a gray area that may require him to go on the LTIR to start the year. Byron scored 4 goals and added 3 assists in 27 games last season, and underwent what was a described minor procedure in the offseason. There are also question marks about whether Monahan and Jonathan Drouin will be ready to begin the season too. Hughes said Monahan, who is coming off hip surgery, will skate with his teammates Thursday, and he is feeling good. Thursday is today, the time I'm uploading this video. Monahan expects to return for opening night, but Hughes said the team won't rush him. The same goes for Drouin, who is coming off of his 3rd wrist surgery. So if we go over to the Habs and their entire cap situation, obviously Carey Price is the big one, the 10.5. Sean Monahan's making 6.375 AAV against the cap too. Now, he's only got that for one more season. It's why the Canadiens got themselves a first-round pick when they took on Monahan for future considerations, aka for free. Jonathan Drouin, on the other hand, is making $5.5 million against the cap. If you total all these guys, it's $22 million in LTIR cap relief the Canadiens are able to get, but obviously with Monahan and Drouin potentially being actual players, not LTIR guys, actual players on the roster, it makes things a little bit more different to absorb. Paul Byron is another name in this conversation. He's making $3.4 million against the cap, so this is another piece of relief that should potentially be there. But at the end of the day, the Montreal Canadiens have themselves, at the moment, a cap-compliant roster. With Carey Price going on the offseason LTIR, things are all right. And if things stay the way they are right now, it's apparent that it'll be okay once the season begins too. But with Monahan, Drouin, Byron, a few other names to go out there, some other contract extensions that may need to be handed out to guys like Cayden Primeau, things are not 100% there yet. Maybe I'll say like 95%. The Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon squad is pretty much fully equipped and ready to go, but they have just a little bit more fine tinkering to do before everything is okay with the seal of approval. So, talk to the comments your thoughts about Carey Price and how he's pretty much done. How he's on the offseason LTIR now. It's real. It's no longer fugazi. It is real, and it's apparently going to be real for the foreseeable future. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about Carey Price, the career he has had, the entire situation with the cap. What do you think the Canadiens should do with Drouin, Monahan, and Byron? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.